Residents wanted Aria Canciño to pick up the phone that was persistently ringing and to hear from a distorted, almost gloomy voice the party at the Marquis of Cebrián's place theme. She, smart as she was, saw the opportunity of a permanent chair or even of her own TV show. He hadn't given her much information, just the promise of more as she showed her interest, because he didn't want, and he made it crystal clear, to take risks with somebody incapable of reaching the bottom. Aria Canciño wide opened her eyes and lowered her voice so nobody could steal what seemed to be the biggest bombshell of all bombshells. She didn't doubt. She took her credit card that was begging for a steady payslip and set course for north. The Marquis of Cebrián lives in the north, among other places. Apart from the title he has numerous properties. Maybe not that much money, but properties he had. That was the party for, not because Marquis was too interested. He counts he has not many parties left, not because he's old, but because of his excesses. But for the institution's interest that saw in a part of Marquis lands a beautiful housing estate overlooking the 18th century noble house, and expensive, especially expensive, not because it was good, but because the profit margin. She was driving like crazy along the narrow and dark minor road with an eye on the navigation system, on the cell and on the tablet. The voices from those devices were giving her tips that sped her heart up. "Turn right in 200 meters," came out of the navigation system. She didn't care. She would turn right when she saw the bend. She couldn't work out 200 meters under those circumstances or under any other different, don't kid ourselves. She could work out the size of a liar model at first sight, but not 200 meters. Laura Dimas came out of the cell. "Shut the front door," she repeated, excited, eagerly, with frenzy, with everything. "Reservation confirmed," came out of the tablet. She breathed with relief. It hadn't been long since her days as a street reporter, where the body got easily used to the good life, and if she had to spend the night in the car she would, but it was more suitable as a more rural hotel, because a reference in passing to a hotel establishment gave kind of solemnity to the information. Fernández Valados and his wife came out of the cell. "Shut the front door!" she shouted, excited. "He bastard! Laura Dimas is going to be there too! Incredible moment!" She reasoned, working out the number of buyers lining up her door with that kind of material. Laura Dimas was a famous celebrity with a mysterious background that had been flying around the high society and nobody had gotten to interview her yet. They also said about her, among many other things, that she was involved with the so-called Fernández Valados. That's why it was going to be an incredible moment. "Turn right in 50 meters," came out of the navigation system. I will," she answered, not paying attention. She had thought to turn as soon as she saw the bend. That was what bends were for, to turn on them. Brandariza Rivas came out of the cell phone. "Brandariza Rivas!" She got surprised. "What does Brandariza Rivas have to do with that party?" went on and on in her head. "Turn right in 5 meters," came out of the navigation system. "What a bore you are, dear!" she answered, still thinking about Brandariza Rivas. Brandariza Rivas was a name not very common in the so-called events. Maybe he's friends with the Marquis, she deduced. "So big! Brandariza Rivas!" went on and on, realizing at last that, as the distorted, almost gloomy voice had said, she had to reach the bottom. And she did. She reached the bottom of the precipice. The 5 meters went by and she didn't see the bend. How could she? She didn't have the headlights on, and the council's people hadn't gone to cut the underground yet. The bottom neither was that deep, but she bumped against a mimosa acacia, strong like an oak, which, by the way, enveloped the night with a sweet scent, giving a poetic touch to the situation. "Oh, what a blow!" Aria scrubbed her face. No, Aria's spirit scrubbed its face. What you can call Aria's body had its face built into the airbag with the mouth open, shouting, "Shut the front door!" and the windscreen shattered on and covered with a mantle of yellow dots. Brenda Rivas, still surprised. Surprised and not conscious of her condition. Among the branches of the mimosa, she saw the stars, and with their light, she tried to find the cell phone to obtain more information from the distorted voice. She didn't find it, and if she did, she couldn't grab it. Of course, she hadn't realized yet. Coincidence wanted too that I won in the Real Milk's Facebook promotion a weekend in a rural guest house in the small village around the bend. "Wouldn't you be full of countryside?" my mother asked, surprised for my euphoria. I was, of potatoes harvesting and growing vegetables, of clean bed, table ready and solarium with private pool, of course not. I had planned to sleep until late, eat like a pig or like a cow or like the animal that eats more of the animals that eat a lot, and if I got bored, go for a walk along the surrounding mountains and take some pictures to upload to my Facebook page and rap in it about it, which was the most important of it all. I had arrived at noon, almost on time for lunch, with the exact time to leave my luggage in the room and walk around to take the pictures I would upload at night if nothing interesting got in the way, kind of handsome, lonely tourist, no, alone and eager for company. I ate at the table next to the window, overlooking the wooden cart that decorated the perfect glass garden, protected by a linen tablecloth with a threadwork on the hem, in refined china plates, not sargadelos but refined, a delicious and especially abundant meal. Unfortunately, there weren't any more guests that weekend. There were the previous. There was an architectural conference at the village hotel, and as they overbooked, they asked us for some rooms. We accommodated the youngest architects because they wanted to party the whole night. The old lady said just like that, and to cap it all, she showed me the pictures. But beach, yes, architects, male, young and handsome, and I alone trying to look interesting in Facebook. Just for taking the most of the promotion, I prepared a bath with Atosha bath sails, lit with aromatic candles and folk music on the background. Then I slept peacefully until I woke up. And it wasn't the cock, not this time. They were dreadful shouts coming from the threshing floor. It still was dark. It still was 3. It still was 3 in the morning. I got up like a shot, forgetting about the relaxing sails bath, the harmonious cricket sounds, and the whole calm's Holy Mother, and giving me back to the city stress. I looked through the window, and I didn't see more than the humble light of the stars and the gleam of a cat's maybe black eyes that was crossing the threshing floor elegantly. I went back to bed. Shouts again! I could distinguish a woman's voice, the one that shouted the most, and some other deeper voices, maybe male. They were kind of indeterminate. I got up again. The cat had disappeared off the field of vision, but the stars seemed brighter now. In fact, I thought I saw some little lights in the middle of the eucalyptus. Yes, they were lights, not stars. The shouting had to come from there. I waited for a while, just to see if the owner of the house got up and established order as I thought she should do, but she didn't. It's clear that the coffee liqueur had more liqueur than coffee. I went downstairs in a hurry because of the anger, not of the eager. I went out through the door, I crossed the threshing floor, I crossed the path, I crossed the meadow, and I got into the wood. Yes, the voices came from there, and the lights too. There were standing in line several hooded, indeterminate, dressed in white figures with their respective oil lamps. Headed by a figure equally hooded, indeterminate, and white-dressed, but slightly bigger, or maybe she was closer. Facing her, a woman she seemed, with long, messy hair that made her look kind of big-headed and kind of familiar. Dressed with the latest fashion but a bit creased, and wearing high-heeled shoes that looked more like scaffolding, that was gesticulating with that much energy that sometimes I got the impression she was floating. "I'm telling you, I won't!" the woman shouted vigorously. "It's not your choice. We came for you, and you have to come with us," the indeterminate hooded, dressed in white figure sentenced. What the hell? I thought. The Santa Compagna! For a few seconds my heart stopped and my breath didn't cut the night. I reflected. Yes, the fear wasn't that much. I reflected. And couldn't it be a performance of those? I thought to myself. Of course! That's why the old lady didn't went out when she heard the shouts. I got closer. Of course, it's my choice. I'm not letting this opportunity go by. I'm not letting the opportunity of my life pass by. Not because of you or because of anyone else. Do you hear me? The woman shouted. We came for you, and you are coming with us. Period. The indeterminate, hooded, dressed in white figure answered. What's going on here? I interrupted. What's the shouting in aid of? Go away and shout in your own places. I want to sleep. As if they didn't count on me. As if they were really surprised. The woman turned round and the indeterminate, hooded, dressed in white figure stuck her eyes, or whatever they were, on me. The silence of the night shut the crickets up, stopped the grasshoppers, and curdled the milk into the cow's udders. I thought, the unconsciousness let me think that maybe it wasn't a performance of those and it really was the Santa Compagna, especially because the woman wearing the latest fashion and a pair of shoes that looked more like scaffolding had a dead body face that sent shivers down to my spine and the Fiat logo marked on her forehead. These people say I have to go with them, you see? And why do I have to go with anybody? I came here for my bombshell, and I'm not leaving without it. Do you hear me? The woman shouted high enough so the procession could hear perfectly. We have to take you with us. The figure in white insisted. Let's see. I tried to intervene. Is it really necessary you take her today? Maybe if you gave her a few days to solve what she has to solve, she could go with you with no problem. Exactly! That's what I have been trying to explain to them for hours. I'll have it ready for tomorrow. I'm Maria Cancino, you know, the journalist, she said, holding her hand out. I tried to be kind, and even Aria's hands were dirty and disgusting. I hold mine out too. And even I don't watch that kind of TV shows, she sounded familiar to me. It was weird, she passing through me. Today we came for a spirit, and we have to take a spirit with us. The indeterminate figure said, Come on, I'm sure someone else died today. I said naturally. Died? Aria asked, not knowing what we were talking about. You can come with us. The indeterminate figure settled with a deep voice. Me? I doubted. I went through my mind to check if I actually had went out of the bathtub or I had fell asleep and I had drowned, and it was my spirit who crossed the threshing floor. You know, once you see us... The Ratbuster shook her head. One day or another... One of the figures from the back pointed out. Aria looked from one side to the other, not knowing, disconcerted. No! I regretting being so sensitive to noises. Why didn't I let four shouts in the distance go if I had the whole weekend to lace around as I pleased, and above all, for free? Then she has to come. The figure in white put an end. "I'm telling you, I'm not going!" Aria exclaimed. And then again all the looks came back to me, staring, demanding, strict, that much that it crossed my mind to go back to the house and finish the old woman off that, well, was closer to the one day or another than me. From the same harvest, but not that drastic, was the solution I found in the way I thought the old woman think. "Holy water! Holy water!" I repeated aloud. "Excuse me?" Aria asked. The figures in white didn't say a word. Probably they understood. "Tomorrow, same place, same time," I haggled. "Same time." The indeterminate figure in white agreed. They left, maybe not very happy. "At least you have until tomorrow. I hope it's time enough for you to do whatever you want to," I told Aria. "At this time you have to come here and go with—" I made a gesture to the now darkness. "Great! I have to go to the Marquis of Cebrian's place. Would you take me there?" she asked with a naive, terrifying little girl voice. If I knew where the Marquis of Cebrian's house was, maybe I could take her there, because one, after haggling with the Santa Compagna, tends to feel capable of everything, above good and evil, powerful. "Could you take me there? Could you take me there? Could you take me there?" A small but intense woman repeated, like a rocket from beyond that had got stuck. "No, I'm going to sleep. I came here for a quiet weekend and I have to sleep." I put an end with a quick excuse to get out of the way. You have to understand it was 3 in the morning. I wasn't wide awake and I suffered the consequences. Aria came with me as much as I closed carefully the wooden gate, slowly the entrance door, the corridor door without making any noise, softly the room door. "But if you don't take me there, I'm not going to be able to do my exclusive." She on her knees, whining at my bed headboard like the soul in pain she was. It was going to be the best exclusive of my life. It was going to be a bombshell. And if I'm not bringing it tonight, who is going to? But you don't think it's a silly party of those with golden-wrapped chocolate pyramids, no. It's something big. I had an informant, you know. She was using that sad voice. She was making that drama. She was going through me with that cold hand. "I'm taking you tomorrow," I gave in, with no intention at all of doing it, just to see if she left me alone, hoping she vanished with the daylight. "Fine, let's go," she said, as if I had already told her we were going immediately. "I said I was taking you tomorrow," I muttered. I know, I heard, but we have to go to my car and take my bag, my cell phone and my tablet. There you'll find all you need," she said, half excited, half bossy. I turned round, not to hear her, but it didn't work. She was making as she wanted to pull the blankets, and even she couldn't. She was causing drafts that sounded like an army of mosquitoes with a sharpened sting in a low-level flight. I got up, I got dressed, and I begged I wasn't dreaming, and I appeared in my underwear in the middle of the threshing floor licking a mattock. "Gloves! You have to wear gloves! You cannot leave fingerprints!" She thought about every detail. The woman was afraid the CSI came and seeing her belongings were missing, as if they knew what she had in the car. They analyzed my fingerprints and they suspected I had murdered her because she was after a long-range information. "I do research journalism, you know." She stood for herself. And she could be dead. I'm hysteric. But she had a great sense of direction, along with, for sure, a great ability to fly and cross through, and a great lack of consideration towards the people that didn't have it. "Dear, you should go to the gym. I'm wearing high heels and I'm going faster," she said with a gesture of contempt, looking at my muddy sneakers. The Arias pearly white Fiat 500 still was smashed into the acacia, almost covered in yellow flowers, with Arias' body embracing the airbag and some of her hair extension stuck on the windscreen. "Lord!" I exclaimed, horrified. "I have to call emergencies." "Are you crazy? They will locate the phone call with the GPS, and this is hard to explain." And that counting, she was the one there sprawled and presumably dead. "Of course I'm dead. Don't you see I'm not breathing?" she said, detracting importance, as if it was a natural thing being in front of one's corpse. She told me to open the other door carefully, and she asked me with precise instructions to take only the things she had told me to, not touching or moving anything else. Like if you were playing Operation. Like if it was that easy. Once we had the loot in our hands, I insisted on the call for help thing, and equally natural, she told me not to. They might find her in the morning. But I, fearing blackmail, it's not that I watch that kind of TV shows, but putting an ace in a tabloid ghost journalist's sleeve didn't look to me like the best idea in the world. So, at the risk of not knowing what to say when they asked me for explanations, I called emergencies. I removed the SIM card first, which I hoped would make the call harder to trace. I didn't say much. I just told them I had a single car stuck into an acacia with a very difficult access, and even it seemed empty, I was calling just in case, because one was worried but afraid, because it was quite late in the morning. And as soon as I hung up, I ran to the rural guest house, hiding under every tree branch I found, just in case they came by helicopter and they saw me from the air. Yes. At the quite late in the morning time it was. In Aria's cell there were about 30 missed phone calls, most of them from an unknown number that she identified as her source. In her tablet, a bunch of emails with subjects like pictures ER hospital, video disco rest rooms that she assessed as not interesting. And she told me to plug the phone quickly, because she was sure her source was going to phone again to give her more details about the party of the following day. The last call was from 2 hours before. "Maybe he thought you weren't interested and he doesn't call again." Oh Lord, why did I say that? I decided not to express an opinion ever again. One vein of hair swelled up or its place all along her neck, and I think her hair got more volume. Luckily, the distorted, gloomy voice phoned again around 7 in the morning. It was hard to understand, but boys were more terrifying than the ghost. He didn't find mine weird, and he gave me, with no problem, all that information supposedly confidential, supposedly sensitive. I was repeating aloud the names the voice was giving to me, and Aria changed her face expression from "shut the front door" to "shut the front door! Shut the front door!" He also told me how to enter an enclosure, supposedly well-guarded, supposedly very exclusive. At this point, Aria jumped on the wardrobe and, almost in the same movement, she closed the door desperate. "We should take the suitcase too. Wouldn't it be too late?" she asked, working out if the emergency services had arrived. She should think it was, and she left the room. She came back excited. "You have to go to the room at the end of the corridor. There is a wardrobe full of dresses and gorgeous shoes that may suit you." It wasn't a suggestion. I thought it was weird, and at the same time it was kind of reassuring there weren't any more guests at the house that weekend. At least they couldn't catch me red-handed. Whoever those clothes belonged to, I would have to be careful in the moment of the departure. Maybe the old woman recognized the outfit. I hid the dress under my own sales waterproof raincoat, and the old lady didn't pay attention to the shoes. Maybe she got scared seeing my makeup,
fantastic according to Aria, and I think it should be true because she told me to wipe it off on and on until she thought it was right. This car is not classy. Don't you have a different one? There, I make it crystal clear that she was reaching the very limit of my patience. But she was right. At the entrance of the Marquis of Cebrian's house, the looks made the Arias comment a considerate and innocent remark, and even though, following the gloomy, distorted boy's instructions, we went in just like that. He told us we had to pay special attention to Brandariza Rivas, advised Aria, who was flying around the antique gardens searching for him, agreed with, because he wasn't that friends with the Marquis to attend out of a sense of duty, neither that friends with the housing estate to be interested in that meeting. I didn't know too much people. Aria was telling me their names as it was compulsory to know them. Some politician, oh, they punched on the tray so eagerly. Me too, but I hadn't slept or had breakfast. What do we have to do? I asked, stretching my hand towards a tray full with glasses of champagne, it was supposed. Don't worry, I wasn't. I'm going around and see if I get to overhear something interesting. You, if you can, take pictures with yourself. Arduous task, the champagne, the canapé, everybody insisting on greeting me like if they knew me. I think they mistook me for someone else. And the cell phone until that moment into my clutch bag. Look, look, look! She was trying to pull my arm. That's Brandariza Rivas! Bloody hell! In that very moment I understood the insistence. He was a mixture between the mentalist and Carlos Sainz, with a suit sculpted in his body which, by the way, you could tell it was interesting, not very tall to measure. Take a picture of him, not one. Take as much as you can, a video, Aria ordered. I wasn't lucky enough to seem familiar to him, or at least he didn't feel the need to come and greet me like the rest. Even an autonomic minister greeted me. They that don't even look at me in the street when I call them names. Go there! He's the key! Aria ordered. Hurry up! He's talking to Laura Dimas! I didn't know her either, but she looked like she had been very beautiful at the age of being beautiful. Excuse me, lady. A guy dressed as a waiter said with imperious voice. I hope you are not taking pictures. Could you please show me your invitation? Invitation? I didn't have any invitation. I started to search through my clutch. Tell him what the source told you! Aria shouted, nervous too.
I couldn't remember what the voice had told me. I got the impression that everybody was staring at me, and that the serious guy dressed like a waiter was getting taller and bigger. Tell him you come from the agency! Aria hurried me up. I come from the agency. I dropped, not knowing what it meant. Oh, fine. Would you be kind enough to keep your phone? And the guy disappeared. Keep it, but don't turn it off. Let it go on recording, Aria said. What will that agency thing be? I asked her. Probably he was talking about a models agency, she said with sarcasm. A whore? They think I'm a whore? I got shocked. I don't watch that kind of TV shows, but I had heard about the 3,000 euro dinner story. No, I just don't like people recording me. I heard an even more serious voice behind me. No, I wasn't recording, I swear I wasn't. I turned round, fearing it was an even bigger man. I can ask them to seize your phone if you wish, and we check it. Brandariza Rivas said, smiling, but with a serious voice. No, seriously. I don't watch that kind of TV shows, but I know that as long as the video don't come to light, you have to deny it all. I didn't get to convince him, but he neither took myself, which was more relieving for Aria than for me, and he went back to Laura Dimas. Aria had told me already she was a famous actress in Brazil, now settled at the Costa del Sol, who was weighted down by some problems of her husband, owed to some companies, not too much transparent, not there, not here. From the dinner and the following dance, we took all the information Aria had come for, without the slightest effort, not asking a single question. As it was to be expected, the autonomic minister and some of the politicians, together with a couple of constructors, put the pressure with promises on the Marquis to dispense with a piece of land. "What do you need it for, anyway?" they told him. Laura Dimas was chasing, almost restlessly, every man at the dinner, not because they were men, but because they had money. Judging by what my ear could catch and Aria witnessed, she needed cash, or someone that acted as a middle person. I didn't get it clear. And then there was another conversation that wasn't overhearable, that involved the Marquis, Brandariz, and a chick that looked like she had come from the same agency I was supposed to come. "Shut the front door! Shut the front door! Shut the front door!" Aria repeated when she came back from the approach. "We have to leave. I have to write this whole thing down. We don't have too much time. Hurry up! Hurry up!" If she could grab me, I could have holes in my arm from side to side. "Hurry up!" She got in the way, speeding me up. I was hurrying. I had already eaten, I had already drunk, I had already danced, and they had already put in my person the "coming from the agency" label. I was as eager to leave as her, before some of those dirty old men got the worm drunk, or worse, the demanding drunk. Unluckily, the so-called Brandariz didn't seem to catch the worm, or the drunk. I don't know which of the ingredients failed. Driving towards the rural guest house was a nightmare. Aria acted like the conductor of a radio program, repeating the time every 5 minutes and counting down to the meeting with the Santa Compagna. It surprised me. I thought she didn't intend to fulfill her part of the deal. That was what I would do. At the guest house, she told me to take the tablet and write to the letter all she was dictating in an email addressed to a corporation. Brandariz has a serious problem with the autonomic Minister of Economy. The Marquis invited him to the party to lay a trap for him. He owed Brandariz a favor for that time when he cheated on his third wife with that model. It seems that Brandariz helped him hide his assets so his wife couldn't ask for them on her divorce petition. The guy Brandariz is in trouble with must be asking him for money, because he didn't stop saying he wasn't going to give away a single penny else, and that he was going to root it out. Now we have to learn the reason for the blackmail, because it's clear that it is a blackmail. The girl talking with them was Madalena Gress, the winner of the Classy Models 4th edition contest, who works from the same agency as the model involved with the Marquis on that occasion, and probably the same that provided the model for the party. Aria was talking frenetically. And what if the autonomic minister is only expecting him, and the so-called Brandariz doesn't want to pay the fine or anything? I told her. "No, I assure it isn't. I can tell the difference between a fine and a blackmail. I'm a professional," Aria insisted. "Write down, too, that Madalena left the party with the minister in the official car." "Seriously?" I asked, because I hadn't seen them. "Yes," she said in a tone that didn't sound too much sincere. The time had come, and Aria didn't step back. She headed her destiny among the eucalyptus with the same flirtatious walking. She ran around the Marquis' house antique garden. The faint light the procession brought vanished at the time I lost sight of Aria. She was a funny girl, but I was sleepy and I was grateful she left in time to sleep for a while before getting up for breakfast and releasing the room. The day dawned with the death, in strange circumstances, of the most emotional collaborator of the Yellow Press in the front page of the Sirius Press, at the TV news, in the social networks, and even in special shows of the shows she used to collaborate with. Going out of the carriageway in a super minor road not lit up at all while you are answering the cell, it's only logical. Well, no, because who was that mysterious woman that called emergencies? Will she be the same person that sent the email and the pictures of the Marquis' house party? Did she go out of the road by accident, or someone pushed her out so she couldn't talk? Where are Aria's bag, cell phone and tablet? The key point is to determine the time of the death, an expert said. Then we could determine if the accident happened before or after the information sending. What sense is there in killing her not to talk and then publish the information? Another refuted. Debates and harmless speculations I don't attach importance to, because I don't watch that kind of TV shows. Neither am interested in what they say or the people in them. Less harmless was the Civil Guard visit. As Aria had said, it was not very convenient wording emergency services from my phone. They could locate it by the GPS. Of course, sending an email from her tablet, from the Wi-Fi of the room you were staying in, is not too clever either. Especially if when they come for you, you still have all those things in your hands, kilometers away, along with the bag, the documents, and the shoes that match the prints they took at the scene of the crime. And, above all, you don't have any reasonable explanation to hand, such as, "I'm keeping them for a friend." "Sure, she killed her to take all the money from the exclusive," one of them said. I heard Aria say that she had a trustworthy person in the area. Other of them speculated. My image going out of my place and going into the Civil Guard's van became public through every possible media it could become public. Luckily, it was getting dark and my hair was so messed up that my face didn't show. Luckily too, they believed the impromptu story I made up saying that I was passing by. I saw the expensive things. I was run out of money and the email should be already at the outgoing box when the tablet found the Wi-Fi at the rural guest house, and it was sent automatically without I being aware of. I was a very good person. I had taken the time to help an injured human being, but the economy and so. I hadn't slept much. It was easy to believe any pathetic story I could tell. They didn't show any evidence of criminal behavior and they released me, waiting for more proceedings of those. "So you weren't recording?" Came from the darkness, from the depths of my couch. "Brenda Rivas!" I turned on the light to corroborate my suspicions. No. He wasn't naked, sat down in a suggestive posture, leaning on me. I ran down the stairs before he had time to react. I jumped over the car. I jumped back because that was the co-driver's side. I opened the car, I got in, and I set for the infinite, or someone closer, if I ran out of gas. Brandariz regretted his natural charm wasn't enough to prevent my runaway, and especially not being smart enough to anticipate that ending. He sat up with the elegance that characterized him, and he left my place intending to come back more prepared, not taking into account that, at that time, the agencies had already found me. Pictures, and some video. The pictures got to the media, and of course the Civil Guard. They could think that Brandariz had come to beat me to a pulp as a revenge, but no. They thought we were accomplices, or that I was working for him, which, in that case, was the same, because I was his executor, the one that had hurled Aria against the Acacia. But of course, the email thing in the outgoing box and its sending without my awareness came in so handy to tally the theory, and that the distorted, almost gloomy voice phone calls from an unknown number came from the Brandarit's car phone, and they had identified the distorted, almost gloomy voice as his nasty guy-looking chauffeur's. True. The civil guard speeded the arrest orders up for me, for the nasty guy-looking chauffeur, and for Brandarit. Fuck him! The Santa Compagna was discussing. She not only saw us, she spoke with us. One of the indeterminate white figures said by the candlelight. They lived in a dark place and had a dispute with the electrical company. Yes, our mistake, other figures said. Yes, we have to make up for it, another figure said. Unanimously, they decided they had to come for me. The haggling had been really fine, and the legend that says the days of those who see the Santa Compagna are numbered, and so. But I not only had seen them, I had been speaking with the procession. They understood I had crossed the thin line, the line that being it ghostly, we don't know if it's thin or not, that separates the two worlds. In short, I was speeding along the Fisterra road. I was sat down, my car was the one speeding. I was nervous, and that was the first road that got in the way. Brandarit's car, driven by his nasty guy-looking and a bit annoyed chauffeur, ran along the Fisterra road, intending to catch me up and some other things, again, not suggestive at all. The civil guard wasn't running along the Fisterra road because that's why they have detachments. All they needed was a phone call to stop me. And the Santa Compagna that didn't have detachments like the civil guard, but had the gift for appearing wherever they wanted to appear where I were. It was a matter of time we all clashed. The Fisterra road leads to Fisterra, and as its name says, there the land ends. Brandarit maybe had a boat, the civil guard probably too, the Santa Compagna floated for sure, but in my case, if the land ended, the story ended. As if they were Tony, the German shepherd of the garage in front of my mother's place, they let me in freely, and once inside, they set a shielded control at the exit. It was my fault. I could have taken one of the previous 50 versions, but I was incapable of choosing, and I went ahead. At the road to the lighthouse around midnight, with the moon and the harmonious beating of the waves as a soundtrack, I face it, the fears all human being is afraid of facing. The civil guard, the Santa Compagna, and an angry, handsome rich man with a very nasty chauffeur. Stop! Civil guard! A very tall guy shouted while the ones behind aimed at me with shotguns. No, no, no! The indeterminate white figure heading the sand procession hurried up. We have priority here. Priority? I have money and bad temper, Brandarit Arribas said, keeping his composure. Difficult situations weren't my strong point, but I was kind of skilled with strategy games. I only had to find a bit of peace to work out the solution. Peace that I didn't have because they started an argument. And who are you? The civil guard interrogated. I am Brandarit Arribas. Stood for himself. Brandarit Arribas. A civil guard that looked like a rookie popped in and whispered something to the one in charge. Mr. Brandarit Arribas. What an unexpected pleasure. The civil guard got theatrical approaching the rich, handsome man. At the same time, the other civil guards approached the nasty chauffeur and they tackled and handcuffed him. They treated Brandarit nicer, but they handcuffed him too. What's going on? What are you doing? Keeping his composure, of course. We have to arrest you for the murder of the journalist Aria Cancino. The civil guard said. She would like the journalist thing. Brandarit kept his mouth shut from then on. It seems that apart from Rich, he was smart. Why Quite different was the confrontation between the Civil Guard and the Santa Compañía. Two forces, one alive, the other indeterminate, face to face. A combat on the heights or on the depths, it depends on the point of view. The spirit heading the procession, the Santa Compañías, made it crystal clear for the Civil Guard that they have the priority. They couldn't leave women that were poking their noses into their business free. Yes, she specified the women thing, because then the rumor had it and they wouldn't catch another ever again. It seems they had a hard time tallying the egalitarian plan. The Civil Guard told her that under no circumstances they were going to agree to negotiate with a not legitimized organization, whatever kind it was, because the Civil Guard had priority all around the world. This or the other. Take it easy, my general. They may take you with them too. I got confident, seeing the debate wasn't focused on me anymore. Sergeant! The Civil Guard looked at me badly. The spirit that should be the second in command told the one that was speaking something in low. Yes, it's true, she answered. And the procession fell out, and they spread around the Civil Guard corps in place. The nasty chauffeur maybe was nasty but foreigner, because he was staring at the show booth, thinking they were the town people in costumes and not being able of processing what was happening. Brenda Rivas was looking at me angry but elegant and good looking. The sergeant ordered to withdraw into themselves, in a circle, on their backs and aiming the exterior. The spirits didn't care about guns. They got closer calmly, gently waving the oil lamps. The Civil Guard were reducing the diameter of the circumference. You almost could tell the fear. It's hard to distinguish with that facial expression between bitterness and lack of enthusiasm they had. But fear it was, because they focused more in their self-defense than in my arrest, so I took advantage of being the only one not handcuffed and put my foot down. Luckily for me, the Civil Guard detachment stopped being operational before they could inform they were being attacked by the forces from beyond. The nasty chauffeur disappeared too. Nariz, I don't know if because he was handsome or because he was rich, got out of not only the Santa Compañía, but also of the charges of conspiracy to murder Aria Cancinho. Among other things, because it wasn't a murder, and so the CSI certified. This way I got out of it too, not because I were beautiful or rich, but by the skin of my teeth. They almost charged me for failure to provide help and misappropriation. The Santa Compañía forgot about me for a while. Of course, I make sure I'm always taking with me at least a liter of holy water. Yes, my bag weighs a ton, but it has two main advantages. It keeps me in this world and it keeps me fit. I haven't heard about Brenda Rivas again. I don't watch that kind of TV shows, neither I'm interested in what they say or the people in them.